He pushed his mop across the polished corridor floor like he'd done 1,000 times before, slow, steady, invisible. The fluorescent lights hummed above him, reflecting off wax tiles that gleamed too brightly for an hour before dawn. The janitor was always there before the first shift arrived and long after the last badge beeped out. No one knew his name. To most people at Ravenwood Defense Research Facility, he was just the old guy with the broken cart. A fixture, like the vending machine humming in the break room or the squeak of a rolling mop bucket echoing down an empty hall. He never complained. Never chatted. Never smiled. He just worked. The younger analysts joked that he must have come with the building. The security guards barely looked up when he flashed his ID, 4 a.m. sharp, every morning, without fail, for over 2 years. The same faded navy blue coveralls, the same patched name tag that had long since lost its lettering. If anyone had looked closer, they might have noticed that he always carried the mop in his right hand, not because it was easier, but because the left hand bore thick rope-like scars, old wounds, healed but ugly. Or that before starting a new section, he always checked the exits, as if instinct demanded he know every way out. No one noticed. Nobody ever does. His name was Michael Rourke, but nobody called him that. To them, he was just the janitor. To those who once served with him, he'd been something else entirely, a ghost story whispered in bars by soldiers who'd seen too much. But none of that mattered here. He'd buried that life long ago. Until the morning it came back. That day started like any other Tuesday. Cold. Quiet. Forgettable, at least until a convoy of Navy SEALs arrived for a facility tour. The brass called it an orientation, a way to show the young operators where the intelligence for their missions came from. They walked the halls in a tight group, voices low but confident, the way young warriors sound when they've seen combat but haven't yet learned how heavy it becomes. Their laughter echoed off the steel walls, mixing with the faint hum of server fans behind locked doors. Rourke was mopping near the main corridor when they passed. He didn't look up, didn't slow down, didn't react at all. Just kept pushing that mop-like part of the floor itself. And then one of them stopped. The youngest, maybe 24, short blonde hair cropped high, face too young to be that serious. His name was Ethan Vance, though Rourke wouldn't know that yet. The SEAL froze mid-step, his gaze locked on Rourke's forearm. For the first time in years, Rourke's sleeve had slipped up just far enough to expose a faded tattoo. The ink was old, the letters tight and precise. MWD, Odin 7 to Car 02. To most people, it meant nothing. But to someone who'd grown up around special operations, that string of letters was like a ghost whispering from a classified file. Ethan's breath caught. His pulse spiked. "Sir," he said, barely more than a whisper. The rest of his unit kept walking, their conversation fading down the corridor. But Rourke stopped. Slowly, he turned his head and looked at Ethan. For 8 long feet, their eyes met, one young, bright, and questioning, the other old, gray, and knowing. Recognition flickered between them like static in the air. Ethan swallowed hard. He knew that tattoo. Every SEAL did. It was from a unit that officially didn't exist. The Odin K-9 teams, handlers and their dogs used for deep recon, off-the-books operations that never appeared in reports. Every man in that unit had been declared Kia in 2002, lost during a mission in the mountains of Takhar Province, Afghanistan. But one was standing right here, holding a mop. "Something wrong, petty officer," an instructor called from down the hall. Ethan blinked, forcing his voice to work. "No, sir. Just thought I recognized someone." The instructor shrugged it off. "Then keep moving." Ethan nodded but kept glancing back as the group moved on. The janitor had already turned away, pushing his cart as if nothing had happened. But the young SEAL's mind was spinning. By the time the tour ended, he was in the restroom, phone in hand, typing a message to his old mentor. Ethan Vance, Master Chief, random question, didn't you once tell me about a dog handler named Michael Rourke? Odin Unit? Takar, 2002. Master Chief Torres, where'd you hear that name? Ethan, think I just saw him. At Ravenwood. He's mopping floors. Long silence. Torres, son, that's impossible. Rourke's been dead 20 years. But Ethan couldn't shake what he'd seen. That tattoo. That look. And somewhere deep inside Ravenwood, behind walls lined with classified files and unblinking cameras, the past began to stir. By noon, people in very expensive suits were making very nervous phone calls. Words like containment, verification, and reactivation started bouncing through encrypted lines. Because if Michael Rourke was alive, then something buried, something the government had wanted forgotten, was about to claw its way back into the light. By the time Ethan Vance's text reached his old instructor, the quiet hum of the Ravenwood facility had shifted. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but anyone who'd spent time in classified spaces could feel when the air changed. When curiosity turned into panic. That afternoon, Michael Rourke was in the supply closet, counting boxes of disinfectant wipes like it mattered. He worked with the same mechanical precision he'd once used to check weapon magazines before a night raid. Every movement deliberate, every sound catalogued. He heard the knock before it came, 3 sharp taps, a pause, then one more. Government rhythm. He didn't look up when the door opened. Mr. Rourke, a young officer asked. Too new. Too clean. His hair was regulation tight, his eyes rehearsed with politeness. Sir, we just need to verify some employment details for our records. Should only take a minute. Rourke didn't stop counting. Everything you need should be in the HR database. Yes, sir, it's just, well, this is about your background check. He let the silence stretch. The kid fidgeted. Paper rustled. Finally Rourke said, I already gave you everything 20 years ago. The words landed like a depth charge. The lieutenant froze, mouth half open. I'm sorry, what did you say? Rourke closed the box, sealed the tape, and finally looked up. His eyes were gray, flat, unreadable, the kind of eyes that had seen too many versions of the truth. Tell your bosses I said hi. The young man left pale. 2 hours later, 3 encrypted phone calls were placed from Ravenwood to the Pentagon. One went to Colonel David Harlow, retired military intelligence, the kind of man whose resume didn't exist in public record. He listened quietly, then muttered only 2 words. Find him. That evening, Harlow arrived in a black sedan with tinted windows. He walked past security without showing ID. The guards didn't need to ask, men like him carried authority that didn't require explanation. Rourke was finishing his last circuit of the hallway when Harlow stepped into his path. Michael Rourke, Harlow said, voice low and gravel rough. Or do you still go by that? Rourke sighed. You found me. Congratulations. Want me to mop before we talk? Conference room C, Harlow said. You cleaned it an hour ago. Rourke's lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk. Still predictable, huh? They sat across from each other at a table that Rourke had wiped down daily for 2 years. Harlow placed a thin folder on the metal surface. It was marked Echo ASH/17. Only 3 copies existed. Inside lay a single photo, 8 men in desert camouflage, faces shadowed by helmets, smiles half hidden by the dust of another lifetime. Rourke's face was among them, 30 pounds younger, a different man. The red stamp across the photo read deceased, presumed Kia. Why didn't you come back? Harlow asked quietly. After Takar. After the mountain came down. You just vanished. Rourke looked at the picture, tracing one edge with his finger. They told me not to. 23 years earlier, the mountains had swallowed him whole. It was supposed to be a simple retrieval, intel sweep through a network of caves along the Afghan-Pakistani border. In and out. Instead, it turned into a bloodbath. A misread signal, an unexpected strike, and half a mountain collapsed on top of his team. He'd crawled out broken, bleeding, one leg shattered, radio crushed against his chest. 2 teammates were still breathing. He carried them both, dragging through debris and gunfire until the world narrowed to pain and duty. He should have died there. Everyone said he did. But Rourke didn't die. And what he found in that mountain changed everything. Inside a half-collapsed chamber, beneath the bodies of insurgents who weren't supposed to be there, he uncovered a cache of hard drives and documents, files written in multiple languages, payment logs, encrypted communications. Proof that American contractors had been selling intelligence to hostile powers. Proof that someone high in the chain had been trading the lives of soldiers for profit. When Rourke tried to report it, the silence was deafening. Briefings cancelled. Calls unreturned. His medical leave extended indefinitely. Then one gray morning at Walter Reed Hospital, a helicopter landed on the roof. 2 men in tailored suits entered his room. They smiled without warmth. "You found something that doesn't exist," one of them said. "And for your own sake, it's best it stays that way." They offered him a choice that wasn't one: disappear quietly, or spend the rest of his life branded a traitor. They had affidavits, fabricated reports, even statements from surviving team members calling him unstable. It would ruin him. So he vanished. New name. New life. The government buried him, and he helped dig the grave. Back in the conference room, Harlow studied the man who'd once been a legend. "You could have come to me," he said. "I did. Once. You weren't there. You think hiding here makes any difference?" "It made it quiet," Rourke said simply. "That's enough." Harlow leaned forward. "You realize what's happening right now, don't you?" The moment someone saw that tattoo, it lit up every network from Langley to the Pentagon. "They're terrified, Mike. You're a ghost that shouldn't exist." "Let them be terrified," Rourke said, pushing back his chair. "I've been a ghost longer than they've been alive." Harlow let out a slow breath. "There's something you should see." He opened the folder again and slid out a photo. It wasn't from 20 years ago. It was recent, grainy surveillance of a man in a tailored suit stepping into a car outside a government complex. "Recognize him?" Rourke's jaw clenched. "Kellerman. Assistant Director Marcus Kellerman," Harlow said. "He was one of the 2 men who visited you in the hospital. The other's dead. Kellerman isn't. And we believe he's still running the same kind of operation, selling secrets, laundering intel through shell contractors. Different war, same betrayal." Rourke didn't move for several seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "You want me to help you. I want to know the truth. You're the only one who can find it." He looked down at his hands, hands that had built, fought, stitched, and buried. "You're assuming I still care." Harlow's eyes softened. "I think you care more than anyone left alive." That night, Rourke sat alone in the janitor's break room, the hum of vending machines filling the silence. On the table before him lay the old photograph Harlow had shown, his team, forever young. He ran a thumb across the faded faces: Tommy, Jake, Luis, Connor, gone. All of them gone because of men who'd sold them out. He pulled out his wallet, unfolded a scrap of yellowed paper. It was a note he'd written to himself years ago, barely legible now: "Invisible doesn't mean useless." For the first time in decades, he felt the pulse of something long dormant: purpose. He stood, grabbed his mop handle, and stared at the reflection of his own weary face in the window. The world thought he was dead. Maybe that was his advantage. By morning, the janitor of Ravenwood would no longer exist. Only Michael Rourke, the ghost, would remain. 3 days after that conversation, the janitor was gone. No farewell, no resignation notice. Just an empty locker, a folded uniform, and a key left on the breakroom table beside a note that read, "Tell Colonel Harlow the floors are clean." Security cameras caught him leaving the building at 2:17 a.m., pushing his old mop cart out through the back loading bay. Half a mile down the road, the cart was found abandoned beside a drainage ditch. After that, he vanished like smoke. But in certain circles, whispers started. A retired CIA analyst in Arlington swore someone had accessed a decades-old satellite feed archive. A defense contractor in Maryland reported a break-in where only encrypted hard drives were missing. Someone was gathering ghosts, not to haunt, but to hunt. Rourke worked the way he always had, quietly, methodically, unseen. The same instincts that once kept him alive now guided him through the labyrinth of betrayal. He traced shell companies, intercepted dead drops, pieced together the digital breadcrumbs of a man who thought he'd erased every trail. And one night, in a parking garage beneath a government annex, he finally saw him, Marcus Kellerman. The same man who'd buried his team and bought his silence 2 decades ago. Rourke watched from the shadows, breathing slow and even. His pulse didn't rise. His voice didn't shake when he whispered into the earpiece Harlow had given him. Target confirmed. There was no more janitor, no more invisibility. Only purpose. And for the first time in 20 years, Michael Rourke wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. He was about to finish what others were too afraid to start. The operation didn't have a name. Officially, it didn't exist, which suited Michael Rourke just fine. For 3 weeks, he became what the world had once trained him to be, a shadow in motion. He moved through Ravenwood systems like a phantom, tracing data leaks through layers of encryption, following trails only someone who'd built those systems could navigate. Every name he found, every account he decrypted, brought him closer to one man, Marcus Kellerman, the traitor who had traded honor for money and buried good soldiers to keep his secrets safe. Kellerman believed he was untouchable. That was his first mistake. Rourke watched him from a distance, his routines, his habits, his blind spots. Years of success had made the man sloppy. He reused access codes, met contacts in predictable locations, and routed payments through an old Cayman network once flagged by military intelligence, the same network Rourke had exposed 20 years ago. Same arrogance, Rourke muttered, watching Kellerman step into his black sedan through a sniper scope. Same rot. The trap was set. That Thursday night, the air in the underground parking garage was heavy with exhaust and silence. Kellerman approached his car, briefcase in hand, unaware that half a dozen federal agents and 2 military intelligence operatives were stationed around him, all waiting for a signal that would never appear in the reports. From the far corner, Rourke emerged. No weapon raised, no anger in his step. Just that slow, deliberate calm that once made him the most feared man in the mountains of Takar. Kellerman froze. "You," his voice trembled. "You're supposed to be dead." Rourke stopped a few feet away. "So are a lot of good men." Kellerman's eyes darted around, desperate for an escape that didn't exist. "This isn't what you think." Rourke cut him off with a quiet, measured voice. "You sold them out. You sold us out. And then you tried to erase it." Before Kellerman could respond, the elevator chimed, federal agents pouring in, weapons raised. The briefcase hit the concrete, clattering open to reveal hard drives, documents, and encrypted codes, enough to burn a dozen careers. Kellerman didn't fight. He just stood there, deflated. "You think this changes anything?" he sneered as the cuffs clicked shut. "People like me always exist." Rourke stepped closer, his voice low. "Not while people like me are still around." The aftermath was swift and silent. The files Rourke recovered traced decades of covert corruption, the kind that thrived in shadows. Congressional hearings were scheduled behind closed doors, indictments sealed under national security clauses. The official report would list Kellerman's arrest as the result of internal audit discrepancies. No one mentioned the ghost who'd made it possible. Rourke didn't want them to. 2 days later, Colonel Harlow found him sitting outside the facility, watching the sunrise over the base perimeter. The same hands that once held a rifle now rested calmly on his knees. "It's over," Harlow said, lighting a cigarette he never actually smoked. "They're calling it the Ravenwood leak investigation. It'll stay buried." "Good," Rourke replied. "Some things are better that way. You could come back, you know. Reinstate your record. Hell, they'd pin a medal on you if you'd let them." Rourke shook his head. "I didn't do this for them." Harlow studied him for a moment, then nodded. "So what now?" Rourke stood, brushing the dust from his hands. "Now? I go back to work." Harlow chuckled. "Back to mopping floors?" Rourke smiled faintly. "Someone's got to keep this place clean." Weeks passed. The facility returned to its routine hum. The young technician stopped whispering about the ghost janitor. The headlines moved on. But among those who understood, the men and women who lived in the gray spaces of loyalty and sacrifice, Rourke's name began to surface again. Quietly. Respectfully. As both warning and legend. One evening, Ethan Vance returned to Ravenwood, now wearing instructor insignia on his uniform. He found Rourke in the supply corridor, restocking paper towels with the same quiet precision as always. "Thought you retired," Ethan said with a grin. "Thought you had better things to do," Rourke countered without looking up. "I heard about Kellerman," Ethan said softly. "About what you did?" Rourke paused, then turned. His face looked older, but lighter, as if a weight had finally been set down. "I didn't do anything special. Just cleaned up a mess." Ethan smiled. "My CO once said the best soldiers are the ones nobody remembers." "Smart man," Rourke said. "Probably right." He hesitated, then reached into his duffel and pulled out a small brass plaque. He handed it to Rourke. Engraved were the words, "For those who served in silence and kept the world safe without asking to be seen." Below that, a single line. "In memory of Odin 7, Takar 02. Rourke ran his fingers over the engraving, tracing each letter as if memorizing them again. "Thank you," he said quietly. Ethan nodded. "They'd be proud, you know. Your team." Rourke looked out the window at the evening light spilling across the compound. His reflection stared back, older, worn, but not broken. "Yeah," he said. "Maybe they would." That was the last day Ethan saw him. 2 months later, when Ravenwood's night staff arrived, they found the supply closet spotless. On the shelf sat a folded uniform, a keycard, and the brass plaque. No note. No trace. Just the faint smell of cleaning solvent and something else, the kind of silence that feels earned. Some say Rourke disappeared overseas, quietly joining the kind of missions that never make reports. Others swear he finally took the rest he'd earned and disappeared into the mountains, somewhere no one would ever find him. No one knows for sure. But every now and then, when a classified threat surfaces and a problem quietly disappears before it becomes a crisis, someone in the intelligence community mutters a name like a superstition, a reminder that not all ghosts stay buried. Michael Rourke. The man no one saw. The janitor who cleaned more than floors. The ghost who came back to make things right.